Hello and welcome back to another edition of Phil's Monday Movie Review. I'm glad to be here and I'm glad that you're here. And before we get started, I just want to give a quick shout out to my parents. Mom and Dad got me this really cool horror movie travel flask for my coffee. Now, and I've been doing this for a while, and all these videos that you see, I'm always drinking something, whether it be coffee, water, or maybe something a little stronger. And I thought it was really cool that my parents got me this coffee flask. And a quick description of it, it's got all my favorite, not all of them, but it's got a lot of my favorite horror films. Like I see Scream, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the 1978 Halloween, Exorcist, the first Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play. Some really heavy hitters here for horror movies. Maybe possible future Phil's Monday movie reviews. We don't know. But anyways, thank you so much for getting me this. Mom, Dad, love you. And this flask, this travel flask, does a good job in keeping my coffee warm, dark, demonic, twisted, bloody, gory, grotesque, and all with a little bit of half and half. So, thanks, Mom and Dad. Okay, so my recommendation for this week is Spirited Away. For all these Phil's Monday movie reviews, I realized that I haven't really hit a whole lot of animation. And that's totally my fault. But recently, I went to my neighborhood Best Buy, and I picked up a couple of Blu-rays because there were a lot of them were on sale. And I found Spirited Away, not only just Spirited Away, but Howl's Moving Castle. Now, I love my Studio Ghibli films, but I haven't seen all of them. Like, for example, I have not seen Howl's Moving Castle. I'm very excited to check it out. Maybe after I'm done filming this, I might just see it for the first time. Also, Spirited Away is a movie, after purchasing these Blu-rays, this was actually my second time seeing Spirited Away. The first time I saw it was about 10 years ago. And I do remember about 20 years ago, in the 2002, I believe, Oscars, they won their Oscar. That was my very first time ever watching the Oscars because I was kind of rooting for Lord of the Rings, and I noticed that Spirited Away won Best Animated Film. I think I was like a freshman in high school when I really started getting into cinema and movies and stuff like that. But yeah, that night at the Oscars was my very first time watching the Oscars on TV, and I heard what Spirited Away was. It looked like a really cool movie, but I didn't see it until later in life. And this was actually my second time watching it, and I'm ready to talk about it, and we're going to dive deep into this animated masterpiece that I'm very excited to talk about. With all that being said, let's get started. Released in 2002 and directed by the one, the only Hayao Miyazaki, Spirited Away tells the story of Chihiro, who is a little 10-year-old girl, and her parents stumble upon an abandoned amusement park. And after her mother and father are turned into these pretty much giant pigs, Chihiro comes across the mysterious Haku, and he explains to Chihiro that the park is a resort for supernatural beings, spirits, if you will, and they come here to take a break from their time that they're spending over in the human world. And Chihiro must work in order to free herself and her parents. That was just a basic synopsis of the film. I also should have mentioned this earlier, but I am going to spoil some parts about Spirited Away. But if you haven't checked out this movie, do so, please. And if you don't care about spoilers or anything, let's keep going. In the beginning of the film, we see that Chihiro is kind of like, scared of everything. She's scared to go down the tunnel with her parents. When she's in the spirit world, she's kind of scared to go down those steps. By the way, that scene is really incredible because she's scared. She's going one step at a time down those stairs, and then out of nowhere, she starts stumbling all the way down, and she face plants onto the wall that's right at the staircase. That's just really good physical comedy, and it's really cool. But as the story develops, she also develops as well. And I love that. I love seeing that kind of character development in the protagonist of the film, especially in this one, which she is just a 10-year-old girl. In the beginning, she's very cowardly and very scared of everything, but as she starts working in the bathhouse and the spirit world for Yubaba, she starts developing herself. She starts helping others. She becomes very selfless. She starts sacrificing her life and limb in order to help others. And at the very end of the film, when she's reunited with her parents, her dad says something like, moving to a whole different town or school can be scary for a kid. And Chihiro confidently says, I think I can handle that. And I love that. And that's where the film ends. And that's a perfect example of character development. And one of the many reasons why I love this film. Okay, let's talk about some of the characters that Chihiro comes across in the spirit world. We'll start with No Face. And No Face is, I'm not sure if he has a proper name. I haven't looked that up yet. But, people in the film call him No Face. And he's actually reached this icon level amongst Studio Ghibli fans. And what I really like about him, or the spirit, I should say, is that No Face is not good. He's not evil. He just is. He absorbs everything that's around him. When he's in the bathhouse under Yubaba, he takes in greed. He takes in a whole bunch of selfishness. He takes in an excessive amount of food and just dirty objects to the point where his being just starts becoming bigger and bigger and more gluttonous. But when he's back at Granny's house, he becomes nice. He becomes less selfish, way less greedy. He actually helps Granny. He stays with Granny and decides to help her out with knitting and stuff like that. And he's just a spirit that absorbs everything that's around him. And whatever he's being exposed to, he's going to become that very thing. At the end of the day, Spirited Away is just a combination of awe and wonderful and just truly beautiful storytelling and truly beautiful animation all rolled into one. There's a lot that goes down in this film, and at the end of the day, once the film ends, I'm left with a very smiling and big grin on my face because it is absolute creativity put onto screen. I did a little bit of research about Hayao Miyazaki before I started recording this, and I found out that he doesn't really write a script in pre-production. He starts off with storyboarding, and you can kind of see this in not just Spirited Away, but other Studio Ghibli films. As far as animation goes, we are talking about Studio Ghibli. We're talking about Hayao Miyazaki. This is a perfect example of when animated films pay the absolute attention to detail. Just look at the background of some of these beautiful and mosaic actual horizons, and they just look incredible, and the animation just moves swiftly and seamlessly, and this is just prime example of Studio Ghibli. And when it comes to Spirited Away, you can tell why this movie won Best Animated Feature back in 2002. I think when it comes to world building, Miyazaki actually puts himself in some kind of transcendental environment, and he starts just hammering away on just creativity at its fullest. When I look at footage of Miyazaki just putting in all the work that he does, and he really dives himself into a dark place sometimes, mentally and physically probably. When you see a master work like that, you just can't help but appreciate everything that you see when it comes to the final product. And that's one thing that I got out of Spirited Away is every time I see a Ghibli film, I just learn to appreciate the animation a whole lot more, the storytelling, and everything involved in forming this final product. From Miyazaki to the hundreds of animators that it took to put this masterpiece together, to the music, even all the way to the voice acting. Everything involved in Spirited Away is just something that I just tend to love more and more. I get this all the time. Every time I see a Ghibli film, whether if it's one that I've seen for the first time or if I'm on a repeat watch, I want more. I'm left with wanting more of exploring those worlds. And one thing I even noticed about Spirited Away is that there's little dust creatures that are throwing coal into the fire pits. And I saw those creatures. I could have sworn, I'm going to have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure those are the same little creatures that you see in My Neighbor Totoro. I could be wrong, but I felt like that was like a little cameo, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look it up after this, but yeah. Overall, Spirited Away is absolutely wonderful. There's a reason why this is known to be one of the greatest animated films of all time, not just in Japan, but I think globally. It's definitely one of the best ever. I've heard about it for so many years, and I remember it winning that Oscar 20 years ago. But I never really gave it a chance up until maybe 2013 or 14, around there. That's probably around the time where I started watching Studio Ghibli films. When I'm watching it for the second time, it's really easy to say that this movie is certainly timeless. There's so much beauty involved in this film. When it comes to themes, there's not anything that's kind of shoved down your throat. I believe there are a few themes in this film that if you don't pay too much attention to it, it'll just fly right by you and you won't even notice. But one scene that I did notice is that when in the bathhouse, when every staff member, including Yubaba, is pulling all this garbage and filth out of this one spirit, it's a theme that we tend to see in Ghibli films. Hayao Miyazaki is very pro-environment, and in his films you see that he always has a message about protecting the environment, protecting the earth, the waters, and the forests. You definitely see that again here in Spirited Away, and I am convinced that Miyazaki might just hate humans, but that's just a theory of mine. But when it comes to the thematical levels of this film, there are a few, definitely a few. You can even talk about family, the hero's journey. You can talk about greed and how it can really corrupt a mind and a soul. When it comes to a simple story, it's all laid out in front of you, but there are certain themes that you could definitely point out throughout the viewing of this film. Spirited Away is a perfect example of what a masterclass of body of work can be produced by a creative genius. And with all that being said, Spirited Away is absolutely 100% cinema. But that is it for Phil's Monday movie review and Spirited Away. Have you seen it? And if you have, let's talk about it. And be sure to tune in next week where we talk about another movie. But until then, thanks for stopping by. Take care, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.